we're about 3 to 4 months out from the Sony A6700 release, I have to ask myself if this budget APS-C camera was really worth all of the hype that we had here on the internet. And more importantly, we've got to answer the question, who is this camera for? My name is Andrew. Welcome to the Lens Rentals channel. At first glance, this tiny little APS-C censored camera doesn't really seem to pack a punch. But like I've said so many times on this channel, you can't judge a book or a camera by its cover. The very first thing that I noticed about this camera that I really enjoyed was the feel in the hand. This little hand grip here is just really, it's deep, so my hand feels really secure while holding the camera. I really love the beveled edge here as well. I think that looks really nice, and I'm a sucker for any rangefinder style camera. The plastic itself sometimes feels really solid and other times feels almost toy-like, and all of the dials do really feel very tactile. They have a nice click to them. You clearly know when you are engaging them. Moving on to, in my opinion, one of the most important design choices that they went ahead and made was adding this fully articulating LCD flip-out screen. It's 2023. Every camera should have this. I don't care if you think that it's cringy or if you think it's only for content creators. I love them, and I think that it should be the gold standard. I know that I've mentioned that this is a crop censored camera, but to go into a little bit more detail for you, this is a 26 megapixel APS-C censored camera. It works with a Sony E mount, so you can put the full frame equivalent lenses on here like I did for this video. And if you need a refresher, the crop factor is 1.5 with this camera. For stills, this can capture up to 11 FPS using the full 26 megapixel range for up to 59 frames. After you hit that mark, you will see some lag, and I did experience that on the photo shoot that we're going to dive into in just a little bit. So thinking about video on this camera, I think this is where people got really excited because we can record 10-bit internally 420 inside of this camera. And for an APS-C censored camera, I mean, that is a really nice feature to have, but it's not mutually exclusive, which I think is the thing that puzzles me a little bit. This option, when I first got started, let's say, 8 years ago, would have been novel to me. This would have been so exciting. But this feature is becoming a lot more prevalent in these budget-friendly style, smaller bodied cameras. And some cameras even outperform this camera when recording externally. This can only record 10-bit 422 externally, where others can go up to, 422 12-bit. I'm not bringing up those cameras in comparison. I'm just saying that there are other options out there that provide you with maybe more power if you're looking for this to be strictly a video camera. That being said, for video, I think that this camera actually does fairly well, and I want to show you some footage that I captured in S-Log and then also graded. The verticality that you get with color with S-Log is pretty impressive. I really enjoyed using it. I thought the 5-axis image stabilization in this camera felt really good, and the two front-facing microphones picked up some really nice natural sound. I don't know if I would utilize it for recording my voice and talking to the camera. I might use an external mic, but to get the ambient noise of the environment you're in, these mics did really well. The footage grades really well, which is common with Sony cameras. Sometimes people just buy them for simply the S-Cinetone or S-Log options that Sony cameras provide. The camera body itself is very small as well, which is incredibly nice, though I have heard that some people experience overheating. I was out in midday sun, 12 o'clock here. Though it should be cold, it's hot, and the camera felt fine in my hands. Being switched on and off, it didn't overheat, though I could imagine you running into some of those issues if you really push this thing, especially in slow motion, the slow and fast mode, shooting at 120 or 240 frames per second. Moving on to photos, this is where the camera really kind of caught my attention, and I really enjoyed using this. When I started my career in photography and videography, I started with Canon. It was just the most readily accessible camera that I had access to, and so I utilized that, and I've really enjoyed using all of my Canon products, but I'm a sucker for brands like Fujifilm and now Sony when it comes to photography. This camera responded so well to me as a photographer. So what I mean by this camera being responsive is that after some customization, adjusting the front wheel and the back wheel to control aperture and shutter speed, and allowing the back dial to control my ISO, I was able to really dial in the use of this camera. And it just felt very tactile in my hands. And I felt so confident that my settings were going to be easy to adjust if I needed to while on set. I met up with some friends who were doing a coffee brew up, and I just took some photos for them, and I want to show them to you now. These Sony RAW photo files are awesome. I love them, and it allows me to do a lot of color grading and post-processing in Lightroom to really bring these photos to life. This is where this camera truly shines, and where I found myself going, I kind of get it. At first, I was skeptical. At first, I was almost judgmental that this camera was overhyped, that this camera was not as good as everyone said it was, and if you were an earlier A600 series owner, why would you upgrade? And obviously, like, if you're thinking about upgrading, the first notable thing is that you do have this flip-out screen, but that is not enough, I don't think, to warrant an upgrade from an already really solid camera that you might have in the A66 or A6500. So then, who is this camera for? This is a perfect hybrid camera for those who are hobbyists or for those looking for a solid backup camera, a B cam. A few things that really bugged me when I was running around shooting video, my fingers did move the setting knob a couple times unintentionally. As I was holding the camera, I'd move it up, and I just didn't even notice that I had clicked over to aperture priority or shutter priority mode, which then messed up all of my other settings, my ISO, my shutter speed, which ultimately compromised the shot. That was a little frustrating. I also found that while taking photos in a quick pinch, if I needed to undo this LCD screen to actually utilize the flip out feature, it's really solid in there. And sometimes it just got a little stuck, and I almost thought that I was going to crank it too hard and maybe do some damage to the camera. Now I didn't, but it did slow me down just a little bit. Now, I will say that this is not a bad thing. I would prefer a more solid LCD flip-out screen as opposed to what's on my Canon C70 or other flimsier flip-out screens that I've experienced while reviewing cameras. Another thing that I would say was a little bit of a frustration was that this record button, while it's really nice, it's just kind of out of the way. I know this is a weird gripe. So I actually saw a YouTuber, I forget their name, but they recommended mapping a second record button to the C1 button here, and that actually is incredibly nice because that is right there. You can just press it and go. The pros of this camera though are that it's incredibly small, incredibly lightweight. I did pair it with some pretty large lenses, but you can go with their crop sensor primes and have an incredibly small kit, an incredibly light kit, really a kit that would be ideal for traveling or lightweight shooting. I definitely think that you can bring this into a professional setting if you need to. I would definitely have another option or just be prepared for alternatives if you're only using this for video. Oh, and if you're wondering about battery, I think all in all, I probably had about 2.5 hours of actual screen on time. And the battery would wear down, but it was never a question of whether or not it was going to die on me. So definitely consider keeping an extra battery on hand when it comes to shooting. So there you go, the A6700, the camera for the hybrid shooter, the camera for the professional looking for another lighter weight option, and the camera for the hobbyist and travel enthusiast who wants to create great content on the go. Thanks for sticking around here on the channel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Do all that good YouTube stuff so we can keep doing our YouTube stuff. And I cannot wait to see you in the next one. All right, peace. I should have said this in the video, but it's also pretty cheap. That's a really nice option to have. So it's cheap to buy, very cheap to rent. Get your hands on it.